Hey, what's up? It's Iris. Let me open my beverage. We always like enjoying beverages together on this channel. I had band practice this morning and I just had work for 3 hours, which I work as a live audio engineer, so my brain feels like it's rattling around inside my skull right now. Okay, everybody ready? You just get the reaction shot. You don't get to see me opening it, but I did it. Slurp. Cheers. Let's get to the actual point of this video. Huh? Yeah? Everyone with me? Cool. So today I'm sharing my thoughts on the whole concept of gender trenders. My thoughts are their presence is basically like negligible and that it's pretty regressive and just unproductive to be talking about them. This is not as much like an academic type research-y video. This is more like me sharing my thoughts and my personal experiences with the word gender trender, because actually it kind of fucked me up in high school. I do not think this is a useful concept, and I think that it honestly causes more harm than good for trans and non-binary people. So I feel like there's been more discourse about this recently online, especially around the question of like, do you need to experience dysphoria to be trans? Which I will talk about that a little bit later. A lot of people have already talked about it. Also, for those of you who don't know, I'm non-binary, which is why I'm even talking about this. I don't think cis people should really be talking, like, I wouldn't be a cis person being like, here's my experience with the word gender trender and how it harmed me. So basically the concept of a gender trender is someone who is not actually trans or non-binary, but is pretending to be for attention, and that they're someone who trivializes the trans experience, which really suggests that a lot of people who are referred to as gender trenders, who are in fact trans or non-binary, are somehow less trans or non-binary. Because if you are defining somebody else as a gender trender, you are not in their head. There is no way for you to know that they are like faking it. And also, why the fuck would anyone fake it? A lot of like online discourse and criticism of people proclaimed as gender trenders by others is like these people who flip back and forth between identities at really rapid rates, or people who use like really specific gender identities like gender flux or like gender fluid demigirl, like all these super specific categories. And I think those categories can be really helpful for people in figuring out that they aren't cis and like further defining their own gender. But you can also run into a problem with those specific categories of like, you really fit into one day and then the next day you don't. So you have to change it, right? So if I change my identity day to day, which obviously isn't a conscious decision, but if I want to communicate that to the outside world, I then have to like say something. If I change my gender online or whatever, like rapidly, that's just like part of my gender identity. Like that's not really saying that I wasn't really one thing one day. The reality was I was, and then it changed because things change sometimes. And that's not invalidating anybody else or anybody else's experience. I want to say that this is sort of a theoretical statement because the way I define myself already includes these changes, so I don't have to keep moving between hyperspecific identities. So this isn't really exactly my experience, but I could see how that would happen. Gender trender is a word used, I think, by mostly trans people. I could be wrong, as sort of like a derogatory way to refer to people who they don't deem as actually trans or non-binary. So I want to clarify that while the technical definition of a gender trender is someone who is cis, who is sort of masquerading as a trans person, it is often misused to describe people who actually are trans or non-binary by others who do not believe them. So it is just another way to invalidate trans and non-binary people. And I kind of understand the frustration, like if gender to somebody else doesn't seem like as much of a big deal or as something that they could just like flip back and forth between, like if they're having that experience with gender and your own experience is so different, then I can understand why you might be frustrated with other people. But that doesn't mean that somebody else isn't truly experiencing their gender. That's just differences between you. I haven't had one of these since like middle school. I'm kind of vibing right now. And sometimes the word gender trender is also used to refer to people who choose to detransition after they've transitioned because they realize that that wasn't for them. And these people end up being used by terfs as like a weapon against trans and non-binary, a weapon to deny their experiences as if it's like a singular experience, which it is not. It just is in the eyes of terfs. In the eyes of terfs, it's an experience that doesn't exist. And I want to make a whole different video about this thing I'm about to mention, but I feel like another instance in which this kind of term would be used would be to refer to like the boys on TikTok who wear skirts, or like people see them as like creepy and predatory or whatever. It's not doing what you think it's doing. Like, let them wear their skirts. Let's not discourse about that because, you know, if boys, God, I'm not gonna explain this right now. Basically, calling boys who wear skirts predatory is turfy and it's unproductive, and don't do it. Some of them might be predatory, but that's not because they're wearing skirts. Now that I've kind of lost myself in whatever online discourse I encountered, I'm gonna talk about my own personal experience with the word because I can just speak more to that because it's my experience. So I first heard the term gendertrender when I was in high school, I think like shortly before I started to question my gender. And this concept literally set me back years in accepting myself because I thought that I was just wanting to be not cis and that I wasn't really not cis and that I was a gender trender and that I was harming trans people by even considering the fact for myself that I could be not cis. Basically, I hate this concept so freaking much. I hate it. I hate it. And because I was like terrified that I was a gender trender, I did not tell anybody. I did not tell my closest friends, a lot of whom were trans and non-binary, because I didn't want to cause harm to them. I didn't want them to tell me that I wasn't enough not cis to be not cis. Teehee. And part of me is kind of glad that I cut myself off from even thinking about my gender in high school or like coming out to people in high school, because that would have been a lot to deal with in high school, honestly. Like, I definitely needed like several more years to really like think about that and experience it for myself. And especially with the growth I've experienced in college, I feel like my gender is tied to my personal growth too, obviously. So whatever I thought of myself back then, I don't think is probably the same, or I'm way better able to define it and way more comfortable with it. So nothing anybody else says about my gender or me is really gonna impact my thinking about it, you know? Like, I'm at a really good place. So I'm glad that it took me this long, basically. But also, like, part of the reason it took me this long was because of this word and this concept. And a friend came to me super recently and was basically like, I'm afraid that this isn't actually me, and like, what if I say I am non-binary but then I'm actually not? And that is just like so similar to my experience with it, this fear of being a gender trender. So I know I'm not alone in like hearing that word and feeling like I'm not cis enough to even be considering my gender or make any claims about my gender. But I don't think that cisgender people have like frequent gender crises. Like, that is one realization I had like a year ago where I was like, you know what, I've been thinking about this for the past like 2 years and maybe even longer than that, and it hasn't gone away. That's weird. That's crazy. Weird. Oh. And I also feel like even if you realize like, oh, I'm cis, this isn't for me, at least you have that conversation with yourself. If you're thinking about it, let yourself have the conversation. You know what I mean? Some internal dialogue. Listen to your body, listen to your mind, listen to your soul. And also, while you're like figuring all of this out, I want to say there's no need to make this all public. Like, strangers do not need to be privy to your gender crisis. And you're not like deceiving anybody by keeping it a secret. That is one thing I've really struggled with, of feeling like I'm being so deceptive by not telling anybody. No, I was figuring it out for myself. And if you want to tell others, and if you want to tell the internet, if you want to tell anybody your pronouns, like, cool, but you don't have to. I'm like really lucky to have a super accepting family who I could kind of privately be out to as non-binary without like telling the general public, which felt like such a big step to me with my YouTube channel. It's not really just like the people I know from like high school and college. It's like all of you. When I finally like posted a video where I talked about that, I felt like so much better. But it took me a long time to get to the place I am feeling comfortable talking about it. It's still really scary. Like, I don't know if I'm going to get transphobic comments. I'll probably just delete them because that would hurt my feelings. Something I want to say is that like pronouns in bio, like that can be a helpful thing. But you don't need to do that. You shouldn't feel pressured as a trans or non-binary person to like disclose that to the whole fucking internet. Also, like, I love she, her pronouns. For me, if you want to use those are kind of like, I think those are my top tier pronouns right now. I love them. They, them. I'm getting used to them a little bit more. I wasn't sure if I didn't like them that much because I didn't like them that much, or if it was because like I was like, it was internalized transphobia. You'll notice at the time of me filming this that I have she, they pronouns in my Instagram bio. I have she, they, he pronouns in my Twitter bio. I didn't know what the fuck I want. I probably shouldn't feel just like, I guess it's fine about like they, them pronouns. Like I'm starting to like them more maybe as I hear it more for me, but my pronouns are not my gender at all. It's like I have she, they one place, she, they, he one place, and she, they, he more describes like what my actual gender is like. But like if you use he, him pronouns for me, I'd probably be like, what? Why are you doing that? So I don't know. See, I am making strangers privy to my gender crisis is what I'm doing right now. Also, this is just how I'm feeling right now. So if I say something different in the future, don't like point at this video and be like, you said something else earlier. Like, yeah, I did. But I do want to say it's okay to not know. And it's okay to just be like, this is, well, here I am being. I promise that it is just as confusing to me as it is to you. There's a lot of discourse about, do you need to experience gender dysphoria to be trans? I don't think you do. I sometimes experience gender dysphoria and sometimes I don't. And cool. I'm finding this comfortable place for me. And something about myself and my own experience is that I am way more likely to use the word trans to describe myself during times when I am experiencing more dysphoria. That's just a personal thing because I feel like I identify more with this idea of the trans experience of like being like very like on the other end of the gender spectrum type thing, even though there's not really one trans experience. Like those are the times when I feel comfortable using that word, and sometimes I really don't because I'm like I feel like I'm encroaching on a space. Maybe it's a little bit of like imposter syndrome, but we don't know. We don't know at this point. So whether or not a non-binary person chooses to use the word trans to describe themselves definitely depends on the person. I just want to put that out there. I remember a conversation I had with one of my friends in high school, one of my non-binary friends. And God, it was like, you know, when you have a conversation and it's like so short, so small, but it just sticks with you. This is one of those. They're non-binary and trans. And they were saying like that non-binary and trans were like interchangeable words, sort of, or that all non-binary people identify as trans. And as someone who was closeted about my gender, and as someone who didn't identify with the word trans, or thought I didn't, that also sent me back so many years because I felt like there was no way for me to identify with like fully being trans, experiencing that kind of experience. It just shut me back into that like closeted little gender bubble I was in. I think if you follow other people's rules about gender and if you don't like listen and think critically, it can be really counterproductive in defining your own experience. It can also be really helpful if you identify with someone else's experience because you might be like, oh, I'm kind of like them. Oh, like I'm non-binary in this way, or I'm trans in this way. Like that can be really awesome and validating. Like someone else is having the same experience as me, but just because someone else is having a different experience as you doesn't mean that you're not having your own experience. And speaking of a case of identifying with someone else's experience, I want to mention this thing that absolutely changed my life. I was watching a Hope Bridgers video a long time ago. I think it was like a Q&A that they did with their sister. They said something that really hit home for me and really helped me further define my identity and made me like realize like, okay, like this is real. I'm gonna cry because it's a big deal to me. Sorry guys, I'm really getting personal today. And what they said is that when they're with a group of girls, they never really felt like one. And that really hit me to my core because I started thinking about all of my female friendships for my entire life and how I always felt different. Which for so long I had just attributed to being like queer, even though I literally did not have a crush on a girl until high school. Like, a lot of people will say, like, they realized that their friendships were crushes or they had crushes earlier. I straight up did not develop feelings for a girl until high school. Like, I don't know. That's just what happened. So I realized that the reason I felt different was my gender, and it had been my gender for my whole life. And when I was home over winter break, I was looking at some pictures of me as a kid, and it was like clearer to me than ever. It was shocking, honestly. I was looking at this picture and I was like, oh my God, like I've been this way. Like, that person was never meant to be a woman. Like, that is a genderqueer person. And I think the reality is that a lot of people are non-binary. And as more people realize this, it seems like a trend, but in reality, it's more and more people finding something in themselves that is wonderful and realizing that they're not alone and that they can share that with the world. And I think once you start to really allow yourself to think about gender and consider your own gender as possibly not cis, that, like, if you pull on that thread, everything unravels. Like, it's you cannot stop, and the epiphanies about your whole life just keep coming. That's what happened to me. And based on what I've heard from so many, like, trans and non-binary people, is that if you are hardcore wishing that you were trans or non-binary, you probably are. I said it. Or at the very least, let yourself explore those feelings. Okay, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. Thank you so much for coming and staying and watching my video. I really freaking appreciate you, and I've really appreciate the support I've gotten in the past week. It is insane. It's so insane. Like, holy shit. Okay, I will see you in the next one. I'm going to show you my outfit. I feel like you guys just deserve to see it. So, I don't know how to do this. I've never done this before. This feels very sexy. Double layered shirt. I'm in the mirror, aren't I? That's crazy. How did I get in there? So I got these pants. They are Dickies. You might recognize them because they're the exact same as my red pants that I got, but they're green. Sorry, I'm about to start speaking for this thing.
What is it?
I don't feel like I can just start talking, so I just wanted you to know. So I want to... Fuck. Dude, look at me, dude.